My grievance today is about the government's controversial 2014 federal budget measures and the effect they're going to have on the people in my electorate of Cornwall, who will inevitably bear the full brunt of the government's budget cuts. Now, Deputy Speaker, the Treasurer, in describing his budget, has labelled it as one that brings an end to the age of entitlement. And I guess that this is a reference which is no doubt designed to impugn the dignity and credibility of those Australians who, for a series of reasons, often not of their own choosing, come into circumstances where they need or depend on government assistance in order to negotiate the daily cost of living. Deputy Speaker, these are Australians whose hopes and aspirations and their capacity to fulfil them depend largely on governments making the right choices and investments in the future prosperity of their people. Now, my electorate is a very diverse electorate, both on a cultural and socio-economic level. Many suburbs, including Broadmeadows, more often than not show up amongst the most disadvantaged postcards nationally. It is a stereotype that has been worn for decades, but Cornwall is home to salt-of-the-earth communities with migrant stories in abundance and pride and resilience aplenty. People in my electorate have consistently borne the brunt of massive job losses in the manufacturing sector. The most recent blow, of course, has been the closure of Ford Broadmeadows in 2016. The lifeline of many unskilled and low-skilled communities has been manufacturing, and its demise, especially the car industry, has hit my electorate hard. And of course, Deputy Speaker, this is not through any fault of their own. Now, people in my electorate are, despite the Treasurer's imputation, keen to work and provide for themselves and their families, and contrary to the Treasurer's labelling them as leaners, they are people who have aspirations and a desire to make a go of it, to actually be lifters. But to do so, they need a government that can assist by creating opportunities and investing in creating jobs and making this very much its priority. Deputy Speaker, the 2014 federal budget hurts people who can least afford it the most, and this budget intends to hurt my constituents, and that says everything about the Abbott government's priorities. In this unfair budget of broken promises, my constituents are looking at an increase in petrol tax, a new GP tax, as well as increases in the cost of medicine and cuts to family tax benefits, changes to the superannuation contributions, a rise in the retirement age and changes to the aged pension. In addition, their children are looking at the prospect of university education being unaffordable as a result of the proposed deregulation of university fees, and there is very little in the way of investment in creating jobs in this budget. Now, if you ever were looking to understand the disconnect between the government and ordinary Australians, you need look no further than the Treasurer's own now infamous, petulant and dismissive remarks that a proposed fuel excise tax will not affect poor people because they don't drive cars. Now, you see, Deputy Speaker, many people in my electorate are not well off. In fact, many of them are living below and on the poverty line, but they actually do drive cars. Living in Melbourne's northwest does not provide them with too many suitable alternatives to move around or to get to work or to go about their business, so they have to use cars, and as such, these so-called poor people will be adversely affected despite the Treasurer's one-liner routine. Now, I'm not surprised, therefore, in the findings, Deputy Speaker, of the recently released report by the University of Canberra's National Centre for Social and Economic Modelling, detailing the effect of the federal budget on communities, which shows that my electorate of Cornwall is the most adversely affected electorate in Victoria, and indeed in the top 16 adversely affected electorates nationwide. This study shows that the most disadvantaged communities are, in fact, propping up through savage budget cuts Australia's wealthiest suburbs and communities. Now, in a political context, the report shows that ultimately the seats hit hardest are the ones that the coalition has no chance of winning. Of the 16 most affected seats, 15 are indeed safe Labor seats. And this, Mr Deputy Speaker, cannot be a coincidence or an unintended consequence, because in the Abbott government's Australia, we can forget about the Aussie Fair Go. Team Australia is in fact more about dog whistling than the good old Aussie Fair Go. The government's budget, as evidenced in this report, is tailored to give to the rich and take away from the many less well-off people in my electorate. The University of Canberra's report affirms that families in my electorate will be hit by some $783 in cuts in 2017, and for families with children, this will rise to more than $2,000. Now, of course, this is a stark contrast to the federal seat of Wentworth, where the typical hit for a family is an average budget cut of less than $70, and for families with children, $620. Coincidence may be, Deputy Speaker, but in comparing this statistic further, the Treasurer's electorate of North Sydney is the third least adversely affected by the budget measures, which might explain the Treasurer's myopia, while the Labor seat of Blaxland is the worst hit in New South Wales, with families being forced to cough up a further $2,100. I guess the people in my electorate have a right to ask, without being accused of playing the politics of envy, I guess they have a right to ask why they are the ones who are forced to shoulder the burden of budget cuts when, as evidenced in the report, other wealthier and more endowed electorates are less affected. Deputy Speaker, such is the alarm about the proposed budget cuts in my electorate that local residents and community groups have come together to stand up, to resist and to fight for the general well-being of our local communities. As such, they have formed the Hume Action think tank and have called on my office to hold community forums to raise awareness, educate and activate residents into voicing their concerns about the budget. For the record, Deputy Speaker, my residents want affordable education, continuing access to universal health care, adequate age pension, a fairer taxation system where those who can pay should pay, and they are particularly angered by revelations recently that multinational corporate businesses such as Google, Apple and Microsoft manage to find ways to avoid paying tax or paying their share of tax. Above all, Deputy Speaker, they want employment opportunities for all, especially the young people in my electorate. So with the Hume Action think tank leading the charge, I will, as their representative in this place, ensure that we as an opposition will continue to do whatever is possible to oppose and defeat the draconian and unfair budget measures being pursued by a government that has broken faith and trust with the Australian electorate. Today I have held 2 budget forums in my office, and there are more planned in the near future. And it is my community's intention to keep the pressure on the government, and of course I want to commend the good people of Cornwall for their action and for their proactivity and advocacy. This is, after all, Deputy Speaker, a community that has always had to fight for their rights every inch of the way, and they will continue to do so now. Further concern, Deputy Speaker, about the effects of the budget on my electorate comes from the Federation of Ethnic Communities Council of Australia, who in the submission to the Senate Select Committee warn the challenges for people from multicultural communities living below the poverty line continue to linger as a result of the continued uncertainty around the 2014 federal budget measures. This is again of particular relevance to my electorate because it has one of the highest concentration of multicultural communities in the country, with an emerging new community who have come here under the Refugee and Humanitarian Program. FECA raises concerns about the introduction of the $7 co-payment for GP visits and other health measures, and believes that it will deter culturally and linguistically diverse Australians from seeking preventative medical treatment, and cautions that this change will only add to the already large range of barriers that prevent effective access to health services. I know firsthand, Deputy Speaker, the difficulty associated with getting migrant women, for example, into breast screen programs, as well as encouraging people to participate in the bowel screening program, because I've worked hard to raise awareness and to encourage participation. This will only make it harder to encourage participation in what is and what are life-saving preventative health measures. The abolition of the Medicare locals that have actually provided vital grassroots services to culturally and linguistically diverse communities already seriously stretched and unable to meet the geographic needs will now see increased pressure of the provision and availability of services. FECA are also very concerned about the proposed changes to unemployment benefits for young Australians, citing that these changes will compound the stress and burden already faced by young job seekers from multicultural backgrounds who are already and do already face additional disadvantage in securing sustainable employment. If we can't invest properly in helping young people, and especially newer migrants, get jobs, then we are letting the entire country down, not just my constituents. So, Deputy Speaker, I'd like to finish where I began with my grievance debate today. The opposition has valid reasons for opposing this budget, and if there was ever any doubt All you have to do is look to electorates such as mine to see that a serious case of inequity is at play here.
The question is that the grievance has been noted.